welcome back to another episode of Hawk Off the Press. My name is Madison Hricik. I am the Iowa football beat reporter for the Gazette, and well, he was a part of the Daily Iowan the last time we brought him on the show, but he's moved on to the big world. I am so excited to welcome back Brad Schultz, who's now part of Hawkeye Roundtable.com. Congratulations on the job. That's a big deal, and welcome back.
Thanks, Maddie. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's been quite a whirlwind for you, especially. I mean, football season wrapped up. We had that conversation in Tampa, and I think it was like before we all really came back from the bowl game that you had basically turned around and announced that you were already working full time. And mind you, we were just talking about this. You still have a few more weeks left of class too.
Yeah, it's definitely been a hectic few months for sure. So I accepted the new position while I was down in Tampa. So that pretty much all just happened in a flash. But, I love what I do, and I'm glad to be doing it for the long run. And especially I get to hang out with people like you. So it makes it even more fun.
Well, I appreciate that as well. We have a lot to talk about today. We have not done a tried and true sit down on spring football yet, and we are very quickly approaching the spring game, or spring practice, I guess is technically what it's called. So you and I are going to have a fun conversation because earlier today we had our first chance to talk with both quarterbacks, Jeremy Heklinski and Hank Brown, for the first time since this quarterback battle officially started. So let's just start with overall impressions. Brad, what did you take away? What were your biggest takeaways from Hank and Jeremy's time talking to us?
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing when I look at both these guys, when they talk, they both have different skill sets, but at the same time, their relationship is very strong. You would think two guys competing for the number one job at a Big Ten school, there'd be some bad blood between the two of them, but there isn't any of that. There's a close relationship. Whoever gets the job, the other is going to be supporting them all the way. And that's really the consensus I take away from that.
Well, I think one of the things that was so interesting listening to them both is that they both were willing to give each other praise, oftentimes before they gave themselves any credit too. And we've seen selfless quarterbacks, we've seen selfless players at Iowa before, so that's not necessarily out of the norm. But I did think it was interesting that even amidst all of this, like the two of them were so willing to just say like, oh, Hank's doing a really great job. He's doing a good job of like seeing how plays develop. You could tell he's confident. Oh, Heklinski is doing a really, really good job of just being mobile, finding ways to make explosive plays. Like I loved that they were willing to compliment each other, despite, the battle that they're in. And they're both very competitive as well.
Absolutely. And this is a point I'm going to bring up, I'm sure a couple of different times on this show, but that just kind of goes to show the kind of culture that Kirk Ferentz has built at the University of Iowa. A lot of these SEC programs, there's animosity all the time with these rosters, and you really don't see that at Iowa. And again, that just goes to show you the strong culture that has been built here. And these guys always support each other no matter the circumstance. And this is a pretty good excuse to hate somebody. I mean, if we're being honest, like I'm competitive. Like if I didn't get the starting quarterback job, I wouldn't like you. But, you just got to respect these guys for handling themselves very well and very professional. And yeah, it just goes back to the culture.
Well, and it's just such a human instinct to want to win. And especially when you're living and breathing a sport the way that these two are, you have that natural human instinct to want to have a desire to win. You want to be able to do this. You want to be the best, especially when it's you've got all of these accolades growing up, and it's like you're used to competing and being at the top of the competition. And these two have it, and they're both pretty young. But the biggest thing that's brand new, regardless of the quarterback that does get the starting job, this is year 2 for both of them under Tim Lester's offense. And that's something that should definitely show up on the field, definitely during this season, very likely during this open practice that we're going to be having next week. Brad, what have been some of your takeaways on what they've been trying to improve upon with this now that they have the idea of Tim Lester's offense already kind of understood?
Yeah, for Jeremy Heklinski, he's just trying to make smart decisions with the football. I don't know if you were there when he was talking about that, but he's a gunslinger, and he's proud to tell you that. Just went to the Luke Combs concert in Ames over the weekend. He's a gunslinger. That's his mentality. But you have to make smart decisions with the football, and that's just something he's working on. You can't just throw it anywhere. You gotta find the right spots on the field. So that's something he's trying to work on. And then Hank Brown, what did Hank Brown say?
He said a lot. That's the hard
A
part.
lot.
Is like there was a lot that he had said.
Right. But I think Hank Brown is just trying to move on from what happened last year in the Indiana game. That's been a talking point all spring. Oh, he couldn't complete a screen pass that would have likely won a game. How do you move on from that? How do you grow as a human being while also growing as a football player?
Yeah, I think something as well that he was saying was like a tangible thing that he's been working on is his footwork as well. I mean, he's Hank Brown, as tall as he is and as big of a person as he is, especially with his arm strength, that footwork is key, especially since Tim Lester unlocked what it looks like to have a mobile quarterback under Mark Gronowski last year. So a lot of fans, I think, are hoping and expecting something maybe a little bit similar. Obviously, you're not going to carbon copy what Gronowski did last year, but you saw what it can look like when you have a quarterback that can make throws and also that can be another running back for this running back group. And we'll touch on running backs here in a second because we had an opportunity to talk to the new running back coach, Jay Norvell, earlier today as well. Back to quarterbacks, though. That's where I think that Brown's big, at least in terms of the most noticeably tangible thing that people might see next Saturday and even into the season is, what does his footwork look like? How comfortable is he moving around? Whereas Hecklinski, I don't remember who made this exact analogy, but he almost, you said he's a gunslinger. It's almost like he's a little bit of a gambler. He's willing to take the risks. And he even admitted, he's like, I have no problem taking deep shots downfield. I have no problem being a little bit of a risk taker. For him, it's a matter of making the right risks at the right time. Like when it's time to take that deep shot, take that, maybe do something a little bit creative or off script, versus when it's time to stick to the plays and make something of that nature work. But I also think, to the benefit of both of these quarterbacks, it helps when you have the weapons around them also kind of have a collective step up in some capacity. There's at least one player when it comes to tight ends, receivers, or running backs that Iowa has added or elevated with over the last year that I think certainly boosts confidence with both those quarterbacks.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing when I look at these two quarterbacks is Iowa finally, knock on wood, has somebody that's healthy in the spring. They haven't really had that the last 3 years. Of course, you had Cade McNamara with the injury concerns in 23 and 24. And then Gronowski didn't practice at all during the spring because of that shoulder issue. So having two healthy guys right now is massive for not only their progression, but also the rest of the skill players. Wide receivers can develop that chemistry. Running backs can develop that chemistry. Your O-line kind of has a feel for what they need to do. And all of that just coincides with a healthy quarterback. And that's really the key. And I'm really looking forward to seeing these two next Saturday.
It's going to be very interesting. And one other thing I noticed, and this really does come into play when you have a healthy quarterback at hand, or healthy quarterbacks, I should say, plural in this case. But I was talking to Nathan McNeil earlier today when we had, in the midst of all of the quarterback talk, we were able to talk to a few other players, and was asked, is there any difference in the handoff between the two of them? And Nathan was like, not really. Like, they're pretty similar. And I feel like that's been the consensus with a lot of, like, it seems like these receivers, the tight ends, the running backs, people who are actively catching the ball, depending on what play is called, they're not noticing a whole lot of difference between the two. And that's, I would think, is a pretty good thing at this point. Now, granted, some of these players have made plays with Hank, with Jeremy throughout last season a little bit too, just given the brewing quarterback battle right at the tail end of the season during the ReliaQuest Bowl, but also just in practices too. It benefits the fact that they both were here all of last season. Where I do think this is very interesting, and Brad, I believe you were part of this conversation that I was having with Jeremy, was the fact that Hecklinski had not really had nearly as much time as maybe fans thought he had last season. He told us it was around week 6 where he finally felt like he was understanding how this offense is working. And that, I think, is pretty big because it is year 2. It is like nothing's changing in terms of the offensive scheme, minus maybe a couple plays being added or adjusted here and there. But when you see somebody that makes that kind of adjustment as late as he did, especially considering the fact that Hank Brown had all of last spring too, you have to applaud Hecklinski for his ability to adapt and take in that much knowledge in a pretty short amount of time.
Absolutely. And this is not an easy offense to learn too.
Oh gosh, no.
I couldn't imagine learning a West Coast offense in that short of time. And by all accounts, yeah, he's ready to go and knows the system. So, and I think when he developed into that backup quarterback toward the end of last year, that's a big thing that I'm watching for as we move into the spring here. He got a chance to probably work with the number ones while Gronowski was working through that injury over the bye week last year. So that really says a lot about him, like you were saying.
Well, and one thing that I do remember having a conversation with, I believe it was on Eye on the Hawks a couple weeks ago, is that, once you build trust with these coaches, they are very loyal to you as well. And I think the loyalty that these coaches have for their players, and then also vice versa, is very much coming to light throughout the early part of this quarterback battle. I will also say, Hank and Jeremy both made it very clear. They were like, the coaches are not telling us who's getting the starting job until they're not even going to tell us who has a leg up at the end of spring. Like, we have no idea.
No.
And which I also think is a very smart thing to do, because as Kirk Ferentz said at the beginning of spring practices, he's not going to make a call unless it's blatantly obvious at any point. Clearly, it is not blatantly obvious. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's up to viewers' discretion. That is your call to make. But I do think the loyalty that comes with earning a backup job, especially with how little time you have, I think that might carry some weight. I don't know how much, but it could carry some weight as we get to fall camp through summer workouts and all that kind of things.
For sure. And if you look at Kirk Ferentz's past history with quarterbacks, he's very loyal to his guys. I followed Iowa football for a long time. And if there's a guy that was a backup the previous year, there's a pretty dang good chance he's going to be the starter the following season. So that loyalty really plays into it, like you were mentioning. And I don't think there's going to be a decision on who the starter is going to be until the Monday before game week, to be honest with you. I mean, I know that's very far out in advance here, but again, just from following Iowa football for a long time, Kirk Ferentz likes to take his time with decisions like these. So we'll see how it plays out, but I think you're going to have to wait for a while to find out who the starting quarterback is going to be.
I'm going to be honest with you, Brad. I think it's going to be even later than the Monday of week 1 that we find out who is going to be the starter. I truly think there's going to be an or on that depth chart. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't find out who it is until Saturday morning. I really would not be surprised if that's the case. Not necessarily for any sort of like scouting advantage. I don't think it's that type of situation, but I genuinely do think that this coaching staff believes that both of them can take this starting role, and they want as much time as possible to make this decision. So I truly believe it might be Friday or Saturday morning where we find out the news, which, depending on when that kickoff will be, could mean a very early morning for you and I on that first football game of the season. But such is the life of being a journalist covering college athletics.
That's right.
Brad, any final thoughts on the quarterbacks? We're going to obviously talk some more about them as the summer develops, but any final thoughts on what we heard from today?
Yeah, I definitely agree that there could be a lengthy wait for when the quarterback could be named, but could Kirk Ferentz potentially run them both out with the ones in the week 1 opener? That's something I've been thinking about too, because if this race is as tight as we think it could be, you're playing Northern Illinois that first game. You're probably going to win that regardless of who's under center. Do you try to maybe do a first half, second half type thing? So who knows if Kirk ever does that, but that's just something that I'm looking out for. But yeah, it's fun to see both these guys develop throughout the spring, and yeah, it's always good to chat with them. So next Saturday is going to be a really good point and see where we're at here.
That's a good point that you bring up too, that it might even extend past the first game of the year, because I do remember Ferentz kind of mentioning that a little bit, in the sense of, if we have to use 2 quarterbacks to start the season, he said he's not necessarily unafraid to do so. Where I think it gets difficult is Iowa's schedule ramps up so quickly. You have those first 3 non-conference games with Northern Illinois, the Cyhawk game, obviously, and then UNI. And then you turn around and you go to Michigan, you host Ohio State, and you go to Washington. Like, that is an insane turnaround in terms of that, like, those first 6 games are like night and day. And so I would absolutely think that Iowa would want to have whoever their starting quarterback will be decided by the Cyhawk game at the latest, because I truly think with how difficult of a matchup those first 3 Big Ten games are, especially just straight up on paper, you would want to know who's going to be handling the majority of the snaps, what the play calling is going to be like. You would want a lot of those things figured out by then. Do I think that it's still possible that things might change? Absolutely. Like, we're not at practice every single day, so we're not seeing exactly what's going on every day, but we are hearing and seeing things from players from, that 30-45 minute block that we had last week where we got to see them a little bit. So we're getting nuggets, and we'll get a bigger nugget, I should say, next Saturday, April 25th, for the open spring practice. All right, let's switch gears here. Let's talk about Jay Norvell, because I think you and I are both in agreement. That was an incredibly interesting first press conference for Norvell. He was announced originally as an offensive analyst for the team. And then following Omar Young's departure for a similar role with the Las Vegas Raiders, Kirk Ferentz decided, let's have Jay Norvell take over the running backs. And, well, when you look at his resume, he's called plays. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's got a bunch of things that he's done. He's been a head coach, most recently at Colorado State for the last 4 years. But this would be his first time coaching just core running, like just the running backs. And talking with McNeil and also Xavier Williams, we had an opportunity to talk to him today. They both gave rave reviews of Norvell. I'm curious, Brad, you said you had a chance to talk to Williams a little bit. What did you make out of that?
Yeah, they really like that he has previous experience as a head coach. And I think a lot of the fan base, when they see a guy who did not play running back in college or the pros at this position, there's a little bit of a step back because, okay, he didn't play this position. How does he know about this position? But when you're a head coach at the college level, and Jay mentioned this when he was talking to us, you have to coach every single position, whether it's offense or defense. So he's been around football for a long time, and that experience has really trickled down to the running back room. And it's a talented room that he has to work with.
Yeah, and just taking a look at his bio on the Iowa Athletics website, I mean, obviously this is a name that Iowa fans know as him being a former player for this program, and that was something he talked about a lot, was how much his experience at Iowa has impacted him as a coach, as a leader, as a human. But I do think it was so interesting talking to both the running backs about how helpful it is to have somebody that understands what the bigger picture looks like, because in some cases, Norvell is able to explain why they have to do something this way, maybe than what you as a running back might instinctually think should happen, because Norvell understands the full picture of what's going on. And I do think that was so interesting. And it's a unique perspective as well when you have somebody who's so fixated on one position, but can also take a step back. But let's talk about Norvell's press conference. I think, as I mentioned, the first thing that stood out to me was just how much passion he has for this university. I mean, he made it clear he came back because he loves this school, and he had not been back in Iowa City since, I think he said 1986 was the last time. He was at 1986, 1987. And so when he came back as an honorary captain last season in November against Michigan State, that was his first time back since then, basically. And that's crazy. I mean, I was so that blew my mind. But Brad, what did you make of that?
I was absolutely blown away when he was talking. But yeah, you said it. That's usually a common trend. People that are from Iowa that either have gone to the University of Iowa or just from this state. There's just something special about this state that people that aren't necessarily from here don't know about until they experience it themselves. And Jay Norvell is a Hawkeye through and through. And he was even tearing up during his press conference there. So, and he turned down a potential head coaching job to coach running backs at the University of Iowa. So again, that just shows the connections that the connection to the state is powerful, and people love this state. And that's really special to me too, as a future Iowa alum. So I really agree with that.
No, I can certainly understand the passion and understanding and relating to the passion that he had. He got emotional a couple times during that press conference. I had said it to somebody afterwards, but I felt like almost when he started getting emotional, it was almost like I felt like I was waiting for that to happen, because you could hear how passionate he was as he was talking. And it was almost like, I think I remembered at one point, like thinking to myself, I was like, I feel like he just wants to like burst into tears. And I mean this in the best way possible too. Like, I'm not saying this to like knock on him or anything. I'm like, you can tell how much this return to the program means to him. I mean, he's been on a very lengthy journey. He was let go at Colorado State in the very early part of the season last year. It was in October. And he said he went and visited 5 schools, Iowa being the last one. It was 4 or 5, but Iowa was the last one, and that was when he went and visited. He got a chance to speak to the team ahead of the Michigan State game. Ferentz had even mentioned that when he was talking about Jay Norvell at the beginning of spring practices. And you could see the biggest thing more than anything else was the impact that Hayden Fry had on Norvell, and why he's so hell-bent as a coach to help develop these running backs into not only just good players, but just good men. He invited them over to his house for Easter dinner. McNeil was talking about how they do cookouts together, and all of that kind of stuff. There's a genuine desire for Norvell to get to know these players. And it's also worth mentioning, most of this running back room, if not all of this running back room, I think with the exception of LJ Phillips, obviously, they've had 3 running back coaches in the last 3 years. That's a lot of change. And granted, college athletics changes a lot. We could talk about that in an episode in and of itself. But the fact that Norvell has come in and made it so abundantly clear he's not going anywhere. This is where he wants to be. And that he is invested in these players personally and athletically. That was a really good way to start things off and to make a really strong impression. And I think it's working for this team.
Yeah, and when you bring up Hayden Fry in your introductory press conference, you're going to win over a lot of the fans because obviously, as you know, Hayden Fry means a lot to this university and this state. So that was just really cool to see how much the university means to Jay Norvell. And like you said, he's willing to do whatever it takes to get these guys to play great football this year.
Well, let's talk about the actual running backs that will be taking part in this season. You've got Kamari Moulton, you got Xavier Williams, you got Nathan McNeil, and then obviously you've got the South Dakota transfer, LJ Phillips, who've joined. I am still LJ Phillips' stats still blow my mind. Every time I see it, he had almost 2,000 rushing yards in a season. Who does that respectfully? That it blows. Yeah, exactly. Who does it blows my mind. But I was very surprised, and frankly, I think a lot of Iowa fans will appreciate this. But I mean, Norvell had a lot of high praise for that South Dakota transfer, and I think the hype that he's garnered, that he had in the portal too, it's looking like it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see LJ Phillips next Saturday, and I'm sure some other Hawkeye fans feel the same way. But again, 2,000 yards is incredible, but some people are going to say, oh, he played at the FCS level. That's a step down from Big Ten football. And it is, but the Missouri Valley is the SEC of the FCS. And our good friend Ethan Petrick will tell you that whenever you want. So shout out Ethan. But that is impressive. 2,000 yards at South Dakota when you're going up against North Dakota State. UNI is always tough. All those other programs.
South Dakota State.
Yes,
you keep going.
Yeah, it's a tough league, and to do that is remarkable. And his skill set's going to be pretty awesome to see here at Iowa.
Well, one small stat, and I pulled up his bio just to make sure I had this correct. He became the fastest Yote, as is the nickname for South Dakota. He became the fastest Yote in the Division I era to eclipse 1,000 yards in a season, and he did that in 8 games, but 6 starts. Let that sink in. Not only did this man have nearly 2,000 yards, he was 79 rushing yards away from 2,000 in this season, but he had 1,000 in 8 games and didn't even start at all 8. That's that is a productive running back. I don't care what level of football you play. If you put up those numbers, you are being extremely productive on the field. And I think the word that Norvell used that stuck out to me was that he was just like a bowling ball with butcher knives, I think was the phrasing. And I was like, I love that phrasing. I think that is an extremely descriptive phrase. But I mean, he's just looking at him through that open practice we had last week, those few minutes that we got to see them. I mean, he just looks difficult to bring down.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you saw of that.
I unfortunately couldn't make it last week, but from what I've seen on tape and stuff, yeah, I mean, what Jay Norvell said is the perfect description. And normally a guy coming into Iowa would could potentially be the number one guy, but we're going to talk about it, I'm sure, later on. But this running back room is loaded. Like, it's not just one guy. It's not just two guys. It's three guys that can make an impact, four guys even. So
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how this group plays out.
Well, when you look at this core four of running backs, all four of them have game experience. And that is something that McNeil talked about, is that, yes, he didn't play a ton, but he did get some valuable game experience. He got a good amount of reps in. And that game experience as a true freshman was extremely important for his development. Yeah, I'm sure it would have been nice for him to play in the ReliaQuest Bowl with his family there, being from Tampa, all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like, you're looking at a player that's come back, that is invested in what's happening here. You've got a player that sees the development and the potential that he has. And so I think that that's really helpful. Norvell described him as very versatile. He said Xavier Williams has had a really good spring. And then he said Kamari Moulton was the best overall package. I'm looking at the transcript right now, which is why I'm able to like rattle this off a little bit better than I would off the top of my head. But he said, I think Kamari Moulton probably has the best overall package and knowledge with his time and experience. And we could talk about Kamari Moulton as is, but I think that core four is going to be really, really important. And with how big the run game is for Iowa, that's going to be huge.
Absolutely. And you said it, game experience matters. We know what Kamari Moulton can do. We know what LJ Phillips could do. But then you have Xavier Williams and Nathan McNeil. Yes, they haven't played a lot, like you mentioned, but just playing in a game setting is huge for their development. Xavier Williams in that game against Albany, I believe.
Yeah.
Didn't he go over 100 yards in that game? Or
I believe he did. I will check right now, but yes, I believe he did.
Breakout game and showing that he could play on a big stage. Nathan McNeil as well. He's made some nice plays. I believe against Wisconsin, Nathan McNeil did some good things, if memory holds me right, because of the injuries.
That sounds right, yeah.
But yeah, the game experience that these guys have shown is going to be very valuable moving forward. And Nathan McNeil, we talked about it before the season last year. He's a little raw, but man, is he talented. You could say that about everybody in the room, but there's just so much talent to talk about.
There is a lot of talent. And raw was a word that was used a lot by people to describe Nathan McNeil. And it was meant in such a good, like, in such a positive manner, in the sense of like, this is somebody who knows his capabilities, and it's a matter of him executing. I'm pulling up those numbers right now from the Albany game. And yeah, Xavier Williams had 122 rushing yards in that game, and he did score a touchdown. His long was 43 that game. Yeah, that's one heck of a breakout game to have in the regular season. And I remember a lot of fans being slightly uneasy after that Albany game, thinking it was going to be a wider scoring margin. Obviously, that was the game that Gronowski didn't have the best passing performance and best debut in general that he would have hoped for. But one thing I will always remember about that game, not only was it my first game covering Iowa, but I will never, ever forget every single player in that media availability following the Albany game talked about Xavier Williams' thighs. I don't know if you remember this or not, Brad.
I do,
but
yeah.
Every single one of them were like, his quads are huge. And and I do remember that, and that will always stick out to me. But I mean, we've always known that he's somebody that's tough to bring down. I think that was just a very entertaining moment, and just how they articulated that. But just physically, this is a running back room that just looks hard to bring down.
Exactly. Yeah, there's speed, and then they're just tough as nails. And that's really what you need in a running back room, and Iowa has that. So especially in the Big Ten, you got to be physical and you got to be fast. So they've got all the traits. It's just a matter of, can the chemistry be there with whoever's going to be under center, and, can they put it together on the field?
Yes. All right. Well, we got two more things that I want to touch on a little bit before we wrap this up. Let's start with the schedule. We've talked a little bit about the schedule in this podcast before. It's been a while since we've touched on it. At the time, the transfer portal was just starting to like wind down a little bit. We were getting some information on who was going to be here, who some new faces were. Now that we know what this roster is going to look like, Brad, I'm curious, with this roster, particularly this offense, what are you expecting out of this team schedule? I know we don't know who the quarterback is yet, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Man, you mean just like a record, or just thoughts on the schedule?
just what this team could look like in this schedule with this schedule.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the toughest schedules I think Kirk Ferentz has had in a while. You look at the Michigan, Ohio State, and Washington stretch early in the season too. They're not spread out. That's really going to be the litmus test for this team. How good are they going to be? So that's really the stretch I'm looking for. And even that week 2 game against Iowa State, that's a game on paper Iowa should win, but it's a game that they've lost far too often. So those are kind of the points I'm looking at when you look at this team. And if they can pass some of those tests, then maybe we can look ahead. But for now, that's what I'm looking at right now.
Well, I think the biggest thing with the Cyhawk game on September 12th is that Iowa State's roster is absolutely nothing like what it was last year for pretty obvious reasons. New head coach, well, that's welcome to the modern era of college football. But that turnover just presents an entirely different challenge. You're used to Rocco Becht, you're used to Kyle Conradi, and all of this kind of like all of those familiar faces from the last 2 years. That doesn't exist anymore. And Iowa has a good number of returning faces. As much as the senior class was a pretty important one to this program, there are a couple returning faces that are hugely important to Iowa's success this year. And that comes from all positions, not necessarily just offense or defense. So that game, I guess, to use your phrasing, is probably the first litmus test that we'll see in this season. I agree with you there. Knowing this team a little bit more, I am very intrigued for, and I believe I said this when I did the first schedule breakdown a little while ago, but that Illinois game, something about that Illinois game in late November is just sitting in the back of my brain. And I think with this offense, it's just going to, not even just this offense, this team is just going to be so interesting. And I think some of it comes from the fact that it's going to be, you're going to have the typical storyline of, you're going to have Brett Bielema, Kirk Ferentz, now Jay Norvell in the mix. Like, you're going to have a lot of people that all got their starts at this university. But I don't know, something about this matchup is just sticking in my head a little bit longer than I would have expected it to at this point. And I think now that we've seen this team a little bit, it's starting to stick in my head a little bit more. When I find out exactly why, I'd love to share those thoughts, but it's just one of those gut check kind of games almost, I think, right now.
Yeah, that's definitely always going to be an interesting matchup as long as Bielema and Ferentz are going to be on the opposing sidelines because they play such similar styles. So I think that's why you're thinking about that game. But that's going to be a fun one. Illinois is definitely not the puppy that they used to be in football. They've shot. Brett Bielema's done a great job at Illinois. They're no longer the cellar dweller that they once were. So that's going to be an interesting matchup, and a lot of Hawkeye fans are going to be out there for that one.
Well, and it's a little reunion of the Big Ten West for Iowa throughout that second half of the season, and that's one of those games where it's going to be very much in that category of Big Ten West rivalries renewed type thing, especially because, well, they're not playing each other every single year. One final question for you, Brad. This is looking a little bit more towards the open practice that we have next week. From what we've heard and seen from the players, what are the biggest things that you would like to have answered during that open practice? And what do you think what questions do you think will still remain? Taking the quarterback competition out of the question here.
Yeah, I'm really looking at special teams with LeVar Woods leaving and Chris Politsky taking over that role. Who is he going to use for punt and kick returners? I'm sure we're going to get a scope of that next week, but there's some options there. Could Zach Lutmer return punts? Brevin Dole, guys like that. So that's really the thing I'm looking for. And then, of course, you got the offensive line, some key departures with Jennings Dunker, some other guys too. I can't think off the top of my head, but
you got it.
You got Trevor Lout coming back, but you always got to have the glue to be a successful offense. But yeah, I mean, those are just two of the many things I'm looking for. But special teams is definitely a big thing that we haven't really heard much of that I would like to get some answers on.
Is there anything that you think we might want answers next Saturday and we might have to wait a little longer? Again, quarterback battle is out of the question here.
I think wide receivers, how have those guys progressed a little bit? Is the overall health of the room looking okay? So there's always some things there that could be answered.
Yeah, well, I think the overall health of all positions is always going to be an important topic, especially as we start inching closer and closer to the fall. How are we in mid-April talking about football at this point? I don't know.
Crazy.
But Brad, thank you so much for joining. I always appreciate getting a chance to chat with you. And thanks again. Congrats, an early congrats. You're a few weeks away from graduating college. That's a huge achievement. I know you still got classes and things, but like I'll say it to you when the time comes in May as well, because I'll see you. But for the time being, congratulations on an early graduation.
Thanks. I've got the cap and gown on my couch right now. So
There you go.
put it on, walk the stage, be done with classes. Cannot wait.
Yes. Well, if you guys like this content, there is a new episode of Hawk Off the Press every single week. There's also a free newsletter with the exact same name, Hawk Off the Press, that you can sign up for at thegazette.com. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.